Dominoes at the Crossroads by Kaie Kellough. The one thing I'm focused the most when I start reading a collection of short stories is figuring out how they are strung together. Two main things I will be looking for will be a sense of unity throughout the themes that are approached, and also a sense of unity brought by the author's style. Starting with the theme, it's really easy to find. It's brought right in your face with the first short story, namely La question ordinaire et extraordinaire, which takes place in Montreal in the 22nd century. It's not even Montreal anymore, it's named Milieu, and it takes place after all the impeding catastrophes that we are maybe expected to come related to climate change. They have all happened already because of climate change and how it brutally changed the landscape. It also completely raised the differences between the different ethnic communities. Montreal is now mostly one, and also the tensions that are built between the classes of different wealth, they're also mostly erased. As we move from slide to slide, presented at a historical convention, we will go through the different phases of Montreal's history, from being very racially diverse and very almost like caste, how society is structured, with even some slaves, going to nowadays where there's, well, we still have obviously different origins, but it's mostly now a melting pot where everyone is mostly equal. So I think, to me, right from the start, the tone was set, and you could feel how there might be a little bit of, resentment still felt throughout some of the short stories, but it's mostly about, trying to find a sense of unity in how we can come towards something together, in my opinion. So that was the theme. Where the author's style really came through was how he explored words, how sometimes he would focus on one single word which would create a bubble on its own. He would explore that bubble and then resume the story. You can really feel how he lets himself being as he explores a story. One word will totally bring a new direction, and he just flows. He just follows that flow. And there's one very interesting quote which is taken from Petit Marronage, a short story, which was, I don't know if it's intentional, but to me it was really revealing about the author's style. And full disclaimer, I have absolutely no idea how to, stress, how to put some emphasis throughout the words. I could never read English poetry, so please excuse me. So it starts like this. I found that words and their meanings can be elusive, difficult to control, because they can move in every direction at once. I never knew where to begin. At which point does a story begin? The question is unanswerable because some relevant event, thought, or observation always predates the action. There can never be a total story, one that encompasses everything past, present, and future. So as I found that, it really made me put into perspective the rhythm, the way sometimes it accelerates and then stops, but also it made me understand why, probably, from what I understand, Mr. Kellough decided to go with this format and not say maybe, for instance, a novel. The fact that you go with a short story, it allows you to take a snapshot of a certain story, and you don't have to justify yourself with trying to start from the very beginning to go to the very end where you tie all the loose ends. So it really gave the author a lot of liberty towards this style, but also allowed him to, since his theme is so wide and can be applied to so many different contexts, be it past, present, or future, be it in Montreal, elsewhere in Canada, or even in South America, it really allowed him to always introduce new characters, new context, to have the full liberty of exploring his theme. It's peppered with some hints of post-colonialism, with a lot of symbolism, and it flows like a nice saxophone melody. Also, there are a lot of musical reference, and I have to thank you, Mr. Kellough, if you are watching, to allow me to discover Thelonious Monk, which was, I think I listened to his album that you mentioned in the book maybe 3 times in a row, right when I wanted to listen to it while I was reading it, and I fell in love instantly. So thank you for that. As I was trying to, as I was pondering about what angle I could use to pair a collection of short stories is always like very vast. It goes, like I said, in many different directions. So to find an angle and maybe to, I want to say, to respect how much the author really believes in what he does, and it's a very delicate and subtle subject that's explored more and more nowadays, but not everywhere. So I wanted to go with that, and I was pondering how I could do this. I found myself reading a few articles on the internet, and I found how the wine industry never had an Anthony Bourdain like the restoration industry had. Mr. Bourdain used to be this very casual guy who went into these white tablecloth places, and he was not interested in that in the setting. He was interested in going behind, connecting with the people who are actually, suffering and sweating and being dirty and having the long days, and showing the less glamorous side. And this is with these people he connected. When you take the wine industry in contrast, there's a lot of whitewashing. So what I mean by that is that the interviews are always given to someone who will paint a favorable portrait of who's interviewed. There's never a wine that has a default. It always has a special personality, and it's unfortunately, even today, it's most of the time when you hear a success story, it's a relatively wealthy white man too, and sometimes extremely wealthy. But even if there's a growing proportion of women at the helm of some vineyards, people of color are pretty much absent even today. So as I was reflecting on that, I wondered if I could find, there's environment is very, very present, and sustainability and social responsibility, which are very, very present. But when you try to find some vineyards that would really focus on changing the paradigms and helping the people to move towards a social hierarchy, it was quite harder to find. But I did find a few very interesting articles and some vineyards that are exploring that. The first one, I don't have it with me. It's from La Rioja region, which is in Argentina. So not to be confused with Rioja, which is the very well-known historical region in Spain. So La Rioja province in Argentina is home to the vineyard which is named La Riojana. So this vineyard is actually certified with fair trade, and they have some wonderful initiatives. La Riojana provides its members with a number of services. I'll be reading because I want to really portray what they are saying. Services including guaranteed purchase of grapes at higher prices, transport from vineyard to winery, access to credit, free technical assistance, bulk purchase of diesel or fertilizers, profit sharings and sports clubs, and recreational activities. Mainly what you would expect from a business who does fair trade, such as the first ones that we saw maybe 15, 20 years ago who were about coffee. So it's the same principles, but vineyards, it's much less present. So it's nice to see that there's a vineyard that does that. They currently have a few bottles available in SAQs, which are roughly $12.60. So very, very affordable. So go for it if you want. Still in Argentina, so I will move with this wine right here, Santa Julia, which is in Valle de Uco. So it's still in Argentina, like I said. So we are with Mountain Blend 2018, which is a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon and Malbec, which are very typical grapes of Argentina. So of course you expect a heavy blend, a lot of tannins, a lot of color and of structure, of very ripe fruit. This is to be expected. What is less to be expected, and you see me coming, this is how they decided to build their enterprise and to have a social presence, which is very interesting and different. So in their case, they have a program built around 4 pillars. First of all, they help their employees complete their education. If some of them want to go back to school, they'll be right behind them to help them. They are certified fair trade for life, which is kind of a sub-variety of being fair trade, it pushes things even a little further. They provide a cultural center to their employees, which has in it a multi-purpose room, a gym, Wi-Fi, and a library. So what I get from that and how I found it related to Mr. Kellough's theme about, having more mixity, having more movement within the hierarchy, I found how it's really built all these pillars to help these employees who mainly come from the harsh background to be able to move the social ladder. They provide all the tools so that they won't be stuck in these jobs, which is, to me, amazing. So before I open this, I have another produce I want to present, which is not here, and then we'll move with this liqueur. So the other product that's not present, I wanted to give you as many options as possible because I know you won't necessarily want to buy only this produce. You might have different tastes, and there were actually very interesting things to discover. So the next produce is a vodka, which is simply called Fair. It's $50, so a bit more on the expensive side, but I think the way it's produced makes it worth it. It's made with some quinoa from Bolivia this time, distilled in France, and all the money that is produced, all the benefits are being injected back into Bolivia to help some social programs. And I will end with this liqueur, as I said. So the name is Angélique, made by Les Subversifs. Before I talk specifically about the product and his relevance to the story, Les Subversifs is actually one of the very few distilleries in Quebec. It may seem a little odd as there has been such a big explosion in gins and vodkas, and now we even have moonshine and whiskeys and rums. Most of these, the majority, are made with spirits that are actually being distilled in Ontario. So Les Subversifs is among the only ones who fought all the administrative barriers to have their own pot and distill their own spirits. This one here is a liqueur, as I said. It's infused with South American mate, so we're really following the South American trend with this theme. But there's also some Labrador tea and Angélique, which is seen often in France, but it also grows very nicely in Quebec. And the main character that is showcased on the label is Marie-Joseph Angélique, which is actually mentioned in Kaie Kellough's first short story in his book. It's a nice character to be brought forward because as Kaie Kellough wanted to bring out the story that is untold or maybe not enough told, the story of the people of color's influence in the modern society. She is definitely one of the most prominent stories to learn about, and probably someone who stuck it the most to the man, I want to say. So back in 1734, she was a slave actually in what Montreal was back in the day. So it's the old port. So this is only what it was, 5,000 inhabitants. And she met someone who was someone who was out of prison. And she wanted to live her life, leave the country and go live with him in New England. Obviously, her mistress didn't want any of that, so she set fire to the house where she was living, which made 46 buildings burn in total and put many hundreds of people in the streets. So she was one of the very first figures of black resistance as far back as 18th century. So this liqueur has been produced in honor of that very symbolic person. So let's go ahead with tasting. Starting with Santa Julia Mountain Blend, like I said, in Valle de Uco, Malbec and Cabernet Franc. I want to say it's $18. In any case, it's quite affordable, and they have other wines, mostly whites, very, very affordable as well. So for now the nose is closed, but you can already feel, well, mostly raspberry and licorice and blackberry. Delicate earthy notes. Followed with black cherry. It's mostly fruit. The earthiness is a little behind. The color is surprisingly light. You know, it's still a deep colored wine, but what you would expect from a Malbec would be something that would be deep purple and almost opaque. I think Cabernet Sauvignon plays a role in the color here. Speaking of which, you do feel a bit of the typical blackcurrant of Cabernet Sauvignon, but it's really not so present. And a nice floral undertone as well. Surprisingly refreshing. Tannins are present, but silky, nothing aggressive. Medium finish, really focusing on the fruit with the licorice and herbal tone, which is, to me, reminds me a little bit of rosemary, but really nothing exaggerated. So all in all, surprisingly fresh wine from Argentina, but with clearly the potential to go with any red meat you feel like eating tonight. Moving on with Angélique liqueur. So Labrador tea really comes at the front. I know it's not the most common note, but if you've harvested some, if you've had some, I know a few businesses sell some infusion of this. So this is really what dominates, with the Angelica a little behind. Very smooth. It has the texture of I want to say a coffee liqueur, but where in regards to sugar, which is always through the roof in these produce, it's very nicely balanced, and you have a clean finish and a bit of astringency brought by the Mate and Labrador tea, which really make for a clean finish. Very, very interesting.